G'day everyone, I'm David Reedy. Welcome to Piano Finally, a podcast by an old bloke who's getting around to learning the piano. Finally. Welcome to show 38. Thank you very much for being here. If this is your first time hearing the podcast, I hope you enjoy the episode. If you're a returning listener, then thanks for coming back. If you're learning the piano or another musical instrument, let me know how you're going with it. You can contact me at david@pianofinally.show. This week's episode is being recorded on Saturday rather than Sunday. Tomorrow, I'm going to the first of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra concerts I have subscribed to for this year. There will be a new piece by Australian composer Carl Vine. This will be its third performance. The Elgar Violin Concerto and Vaughan Williams Symphony No. 3. There's also a pre-concert lecture. I'll give you a full rundown next week. I regularly watch the RobWords YouTube channel, and it was not surprising that the YouTube algorithm suggested another channel that RobWords presents, Words Unravelled. This channel is presented by Rob and American academic Jess Zafarris, and similarly to RobWords, it looks at the origin of language. The episode YouTube suggested is entitled, What's the Difference Between a Violin and a Fiddle? And it looks at the origin of instrument names and other musical terms. I'm sure we all know that a piano gets its name from a contraction of pianoforte, which is itself a contraction of gravicembalo con piano e forte. But what about all the other instruments in the orchestra, or the word orchestra itself? In the video, they look at stringed instruments, most of which are named after variations on violin, and the brass instruments being variations of tubes. You might be surprised at where the word trumpet fits in. And it looks at most of the other instruments too. It's a fun episode of a really educational YouTube channel and well worth a watch. And yes, they do explain the difference between a violin and a fiddle. There's a link in the show notes. Move on. The title of this week's essay is also the title of one of my favourite Stephen Sondheim songs. Move On is from the second act of Sunday in the Park with George. And if you're going to get a version to listen to, find the original Broadway recording with Bernadette Peters and Mandy Patinkin. It's amazing. But what does that have to do with piano playing? Apart from the fact that I would like to be able to play that piece myself one day. The song is about moving forward as an artist and, to some extent, ignoring the opinions of others regarding your art. And I was thinking about how, as a piano learner, we continually need to be moving forward with what we are learning and performing. But that's not my immediate application of the move on message. Instead, move on is what I need to do when I'm practicing, and it's proving harder than I expected. As I've explained before, I like to think that there are three main phases when I'm learning a new piece of music. I start out, what does this even sound like? And that leads on to learning the notes. It usually involves getting any of the sharps or flats in the key signature wrong the first time through, shifting my hands to a new position for some of the piece, then forgetting to shift them back. But eventually I will have a reasonable idea of how the piece will work together. Remember, we're not talking about long pieces at this stage. I'm yet to play any piece that involves turning a page while playing or using the pedal for the iPad. Actually, I'm not using the pedals on the piano either. None of the pieces I've learned so far has pedal markings. I think they come in at the next level up. The longest part of my practice journey is where I start to get the dynamics and articulations into place. And this is a spot where having Debbie as a piano teacher is great. I will hear if I play a wrong note, but she will hear everything else I get wrong as well, such as incorrect dynamics or none at all, incorrect note durations, and me changing fingerings halfway through. Once she's made me aware of them, I usually notice them myself when I'm next practicing at home, so I can stop and go back and correct them. When I'm at this stage of practicing, all the advice is to stop when there's a mistake, correct it, and then repeat the correction a number of times until I've played it correctly many more times than I've played it incorrectly. I will usually try to get it right 5 times in a row before moving on. I have no problem with this, and there is certainly a sense of accomplishment when I do finally get it all working correctly. The problem comes at the next stage. Once I've got a piece where I can play it correctly, remembering the dynamics and articulation and consistent fingerings, it moves on to performance mode. Well, not really performance mode, but I'm calling it that to indicate that the goal is to have it playable without errors at the indicated speed. This is also the stage where, after a week or two, it will move to the only 2 playthroughs per practice list. And this is where move on comes into play. When I make a mistake, I stop. That's what I've been doing for all the practice for this piece up to that point. But if this is going to be for performance, then I can't stop. I have to move on. And this is where I'm having problems. The idea is that if you make a mistake, you should be able to get back to the score without it being really obvious, in particular, without messing up the rhythm. At the moment, I can't do this. I'm just about able to stop myself from going back to before the mistake and repeating the notes, but it's a struggle, and coming up with something inventive to cover the gaffe is something that I'm really going to have to work on. I hope it will come as I gain more confidence with scales and automatically know which keys it is okay to play, rather than have to stop and carefully analyse. Of course, the perfect solution would be to just never make a mistake while playing, but I'm pretty sure I can't rely on that. One of the things I've learned from watching all those pianist interviews from the competitions is that even they make the occasional error, but they're able to move on without it affecting the performance. It's great to know that there is still so much to learn, and this is really going to keep me busy. A couple of weeks ago, Devi, my piano teacher, lent me a book about practicing, The Musician's Way, A Guide to Practice, Performance and Wellness by Gerald Klickstein. It was published in 2009 by Oxford University Press. Mr. Klickstein is a performer and a teacher, and when he wrote the book, he already had over 30 years of experience helping musicians achieve excellence in their practice and in their performances. The book is divided into 3 sections. The first covers how to practice, the second how to perform, and the third looks at creativity as a performer. I've only read the first section so far. I'm not ready to perform, and I've been looking at ways of practicing more effectively. The book assumes that you are beyond the beginner stage of learning. It's not heavy on theory, but it does expect that you are playing pieces of moderate length and complexity. So many of the examples are given in that context. That doesn't mean that the advice can't still be helpful to a beginner. It just means that you can skip some of the more complex procedures, as those situations don't arise in the music that beginners play. Mr. Klickstein divides practice into 3 phases: new material, developing material, and performance material. And he details different approaches for each of these phases. He also has suggestions on what to do once you're happy with the material in your performance zone. His advice includes strategies for memorization, ways of breaking down complex or difficult passages, and ways of keeping your playing fresh. One of the first pieces of advice Mr. Klickstein gives concerns how to go about learning a new piece. Remember that he is aiming this at intermediate players. He suggests that even before touching the keys, you should listen to recordings of the piece you want to learn. His reasoning is that you need to know where you are heading in your practice if you're going to practice the correct way. This is very similar to the advice that Devi has given me, including the articulation and dynamics from the very beginning, so that the incorrect version of the music is not the one that you learn first. The book includes lots of advice for particular instruments and singers, but most of it is still relevant for keyboard players. The terminology uses largely the US forms of notation, so 16th notes rather than semiquavers, but everyone is pretty adept at moving between the 2 systems. If you can't find The Musician's Way at your local music store, it's available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle formats. There's a link in the show notes. Well, that's it for this week. If you'd like to contact me, email is the best way. You'll find me at david@pianofinally.show and the website at www.pianofinally.show. In both cases, Piano Finally is all one word. The show is also on Facebook and Instagram and available as audio only on YouTube. You can subscribe via any popular iOS or Android podcast application or from directories such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. I also post an excerpt and link for each episode as an Instagram reel. If you're learning an instrument, let me know where you are in your journey, what's going well, and what are the challenges. And so, until the next episode, I hope your piano stays in tune and you enjoy your time at the keys. The three pieces in this week's progress section are Daniel Gottlob Turk's Bagatelle in F and Andrew Cragg's Afternoon Snooze and Blackout Blues. It's just the beginning of Blackout Blues again. I've been concentrating on getting both hands to work together and getting the correct rhythm with the chords. It's the link to the next phrase that is proving tricky. All the recordings were made using the Kawai NV10 as the keyboard and Pianotech 8 running on the M4 Pro Mac Mini. Pianotech is set to the New York Steinway D piano in player mode.